We got that right on time. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic. We're happy to be back. Happy Sunday evening. I am your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And this is the show where we discuss the mythological significance of fiction. And in particular, in this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball. And we are on episode 18. Which
This episode's
is
called The Turtle Hermit Way.
Yes, and we'll get. I think we have a slide for that, but just some housekeeping stuff. We made a tribute to the passing of Miura. Just want to mention it. We made that a couple days ago, so I just want to shout out one last time. Rest in peace. Your influence was unspeak. I have no words for it. It's immeasurable.
There's no end to it.
Yeah. So, other than that, we're continuing our Myth and Meaning series. We are about to wrap up season 1 with that, so we'll get to the next part of that shortly. And season 2 will look a little bit different, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
Brock, you have any housekeeping stuff you want to add before we go ahead and dive in?
No, I'm pretty ready to dive into this one.
Alrighty, then let's get started. So, last time we saw just a brief recap. The milk delivery was the first step of the journey. There was a lot of ethos behind the using of that milk delivery to train the boys, and we talked about that in that episode. But now we get to see the rest of the training.
Right, last episode introduced sort of the idea of empowerment through responsibility for the boys, and then we're going to see the extension of that as we get into this episode.
And wait, say that phrase again you started with?
We were introduced to the idea of their empowerment through their responsibility.
Yes. And to whom those responsibilities are owed it's specifically indicated in the last episode. But this episode kind of starts with a recap of that, because we start off with 4:30, and it's still their first day of training, really.
Right, it just sort of reintroduces it, so that I think it's good in this episode just to frame the scope of what that training is. Yeah,
you need the full day, and it wouldn't fit in one episode because each step is, and like I put in the description, each step I would say is entirely mythological and has purpose behind it. So let's get started here. They do milk delivery at 4:30, and here is our title slide: The Eternal Hermit's Intense Training. I believe I like the use of way in the English translation. I think it really ties into that Taoist ideal.
Yeah, it directly is just stating this is the way. This is the way.
Hey, D-Way, you got to know about it.
And the way is intense.
Yeah, I mean, life is intense. And it's a preparation for that, not just fighting, which should be already apparent, but I think it goes even in more depth in this particular episode about how it isn't specifically about fighting, powering up and being stronger than other characters, especially when comparing other characters in fiction. It doesn't matter. It's a pointless conversation. But we also see here, why is this the frame they used for the intense training?
Well, the most intense training for Goku, the most challenging training for him is right here.
Anyone is, I would say, the most intense training is internal, right?
And I mean, I think it's either in this episode or the next one that Roshi explicitly states that. I think it's the next episode, but yeah, it essentially says no, the true training is with yourself.
And we see all these great fighters training around the world for the tournament. And just to reframe the tournament really quickly, what is it?
It is the hierarchy of being within your inherited society, I think, with your relationship to the world. And it's also the hierarchies of modes of being, I think.
Yeah. It's a physical manifestation of the hierarchy. I don't know if I would say of society. It's more, I would say more it's the hierarchy of human spirit, because why do people go and watch sporting events to begin with, or fights? It's that elevation, and Dr. Peterson talks about this, that elevation of human spirit that can happen when someone performing pushes themselves beyond their limits. And I think that's really the hierarchy that the Tenkaichi Budokai is addressing.
Right, the hierarchy of being
Right.
itself.
Mm-hmm. A physical manifestation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they fight. We're not saying they don't.
Obviously, but what they fight with are ideas primarily.
Yes, and so we see a lumberjack that we never we never see any
I
of
don't
these
think we
guys.
ever see these guys again. We might see the boxer.
Poor guys. But they're really trying, and I think you had something to mention about the translation of the top right-hand corner, boys.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of this episode I actually like the Japanese translation better, the original better. At least as far as the English translation of the Japanese and the subtitles versus what we actually got in the dub. It's kind of I think in the scene on the top right, they're like, "Eat fighting, sleep fighting," and they're basically literally saying out loud that they're trying to embody fighting in everything. But in Japanese, it's very much just keep your mind on the Tenkaichi,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. So it's a less spoken, but I think that it starts out with these scenes showing the different ways that people are training themselves for this tournament, just to highlight that there isn't one way to prepare for this tournament.
Right, and I would say our commentary on the title being better in the translated version is it's probably one of the only praises the English translation is going to get, to be honest.
Yeah, I love the subs on this one specifically just throughout. But yeah, we basically get introduced to the parallels of their training versus other training, and I like that we see someone chopping down trees as an example of one of. I want to tie that back into like Goku's original mode of being in nature and the hierarchy of the self within the natural world, right? And it's like, yeah, this is even just out in nature. This is a form of training that you can take on that can carry you to this Tenkaichi Budokai.
Yeah, and I also think I think that might be why the English translation made it eat fighting, sleep fighting, all that, because that's not the ethos that Roshi uses.
Yeah, it's literal. He's saying it's not about winning a fight, right? And that gets elucidated over the course of the next two episodes. So I didn't like necessarily that the English version is trying to make it so much just about fights and explicitly stating it's fighting, it's fighting, it's fighting. It's like, well, yeah, but no.
Right, exactly, and that's what I mean. It may be trying to drive that point home, but at the same time, it better characterizes what the Tenkaichi is with the original words. And so back to the Roshi training here.
So we get a little recap of what the morning training is, where they do their delivery, and then they get through their mid-morning training, and then Roshi's like, all right, are you ready? Or they get done with their early morning training, and he's like, are you ready for your mid-morning training now? So he takes them to this farmer and says, okay, now your mid-morning training will be to help with plowing a field. Or not really help with, because he just hands it over to them. You're going to go plow this field.
Right. And how do they plow? Or is that going to be on the next one, I think?
It is. I wanted to point out with this image on the right, too, that I think that's a classical spirit that we can just see historically, that historically children have taken up the mantle of doing a lot of the hard work because of the amount of potential they have and how much it builds character, right? And it's like, and he knows the score, right? He says, oh, the children are here to do the work. Boom. Let them do the work, right? And he knows that if he were to interfere, he would only weaken their training by having to take the responsibility of doing this.
Right. He understands it, and actually he recognizes Master Roshi, a character that we'll see later is kind of the opposite. We'll contrast them when we get there. You can't use those hoes. Don't be using them.
Don't use them at all. Use your hands.
So, specifically, this is what Roshi says is to improve their dexterity.
It's to strengthen their hands. And he says in the Japanese, more so than strengthening your arms and legs, this is to strengthen your hands, right?
Right. Which, what do you think that means in the context of it being farming and agriculture that they are working with?
Strengthening the hands in relation to farming and agriculture.
Mythologically, what is your analysis?
Mythologically speaking, so I'm just going to start thinking on my toes on this one, but one aspect of hands and mythological thinking has to do with grasping, of being able to affect change. And so strengthening your hands through the act of actually physically having to work the earth with them, it's sort of like, if you want to be able to change the world, you have to change yourself, right? And they're physically changing something about the earth now with their hands. They're, escalating the idea of the responsibility to the land too.
Interesting. I'm glad I asked you these questions because I didn't think, and it's clear you didn't have a preconceived analysis. So
yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. I was thinking more along the lines of hands being symbolic for like your actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is nourishing their actions, because what is farming? What are they doing, right? They're nourishing the earth, growing stuff from it.
Right. It's a wholly creative action.
Right.
It's the work in the creative action.
And so what they're doing is they're nourishing their actions in a way that's positive, and like you said, has that element of taking over the responsibility from the older people to nourish the community.
Mm-hmm. And by doing so, you're
Right.
strengthening your hands. You're strengthening your ability to affect that change.
Your ethic when you act is strengthened through this process.
Yeah.
That's my analysis whenever we were watching it over there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a better way of verbalizing that, right? The ethic of it's to say that if you're using your ability to change things around you in an ethical way, it will strengthen your ability to do that too.
It's not just that. It's when your actions nourish the community, it improves the ethic of your actions.
It improves the ethic of your actions.
When the spirit when your actions that's what I said. When the actions that you do nourish the community, it improves the ethic of your actions.
Right.
What do you think about that?
That's the idea that if you act in a wholly positive way, it improves your mode of being so that your actions are better. Right. Automatically, it strengthens your ethic of your actions. Yeah, I see where you're going with it.
Right. And if you, let's say, do the opposite, pathologize the ethic of your actions, what happens?
They become worse.
Right, but what happens to other people too?
Well, they don't get fed.
The society continues to be pathologized, right? And that can go down a dark path. So this is one of the first lessons after the milk delivery, and just another subservience to an idea. Each of these has significance, each of these pieces of training. Turtle Hermit Way is not just running around with turtle shells on, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much better delineation of like that Mr. Miyagi way, right? Because we're seeing that start to come into being now, where it's like, okay, are all of their tasks going to be serving other people and doing things that you could say clean up their room?
Mm-hmm. And we'll see.
And that's pretty much it.
So during the event, Krillin is having some trouble.
So just like the milk delivery, we see the complaining of Krillin and that it comes easier to Goku, and that Krillin is doubtful of his abilities. Right? He's like, "Oh, my fingernails are coming off. This is so hard." And Goku's not saying that. He's saying, while he's just digging at the earth.
Yeah, he's more focused, I would say, on the task, and it's a physical task. And we're gonna see kind of how Goku meets his match in a minute. But yeah, just to point out the Krillin let's say the position of Krillin in the hierarchy is still lower than Goku, and I think it's just that's pretty much what the point is making here, and how let's say intense the turtle hermit training is, because that's made clearly evident in the title.
Yeah, and I mean it kind of ties into that idea of just building calluses on your hands as sort of a sign of your work ethic. There's a reason they call it your work ethic, right?
And what happens when you improve your work ethic? You're rewarded. How? Look at this. I would say there's a reward.
Breakfast. This is always a reward.
Breakfast.
Breakfast. So Mommy Launch has breakfast ready for them.
Yes.
And I think when we were watching it, you had said home, right? That this is an aspect of the home that Launch integrates into their learning experience, right?
Right. This couldn't if and that's what I was trying to point out when we were way back in season 2. I think our first episodes of season 2. We were talking about why it's necessary for Launch to be here. This is the reason, because without a motherly and a fatherly figure, the home as such is not.
Well, it's to point out that the role that Launch is playing is to nourish them so that they can nourish society, right? And so it's pointing out the necessity of that traditional feminine role in a home.
Yep. So they begin to eat, we humbly accept, and Krillin...
Just like before, Krillin is causing Launch to sneeze, right? And
of course it's Krillin.
I think my takeaway from this scene automatically is it shows they're all, except for Goku, saying we humbly accept, and with humility, not immediately jumping in. They're showing the appreciation to Launch, whereas as they're saying that, Goku just digs right into the food, right? And my analysis has been skewing towards Krillin being this extension of Goku, right? This earthly representation of Goku's spirit, or even an egoistic representation. So as Goku is disrespectful to Launch, then Krillin does an action that causes Launch to sneeze. I don't think that Goku's necessarily being disrespectful to Launch, but he's not showing the same reverence toward what she's done as everybody else.
Okay.
Because he's not as civilized. Right?
Also, I would say add to that. I mean, yes, Goku and Krillin are reflective of each other a lot in this first season. I wouldn't say it's like as closely related as Oolong and Puar.
No.
Not at all. But they are reflective. And what do you think about Krillin's dissatisfaction with the food as it is as well?
Right. I mean, it's sort of the entitlement of like, okay, somebody cooked me this amazing meal, but it's still not good enough.
And I think too, it's just also, I mean, Krillin should know better at this point.
Well, yeah.
Because what does Roshi say?
He's being so obviously blind to what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
And Roshi is like, Krillin, stop! You know what you're gonna do, and he just doesn't listen and causes her to sneeze, and so, of course, she snaps and attacks them, shoots the table and the plates, and trashes the entire breakfast, and runs them off.
Right, and that it's pretty much what happens if you don't pay proper respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, like you were saying, the taking lightly of saying grace, let's say, being thankful for the food.
Yeah.
Which is not just a Christian thing.
No, it's as an act. It's not the result of the act. And Goku is still. We saw him struggle with this idea a little bit in the last episode, where he was like, "Why can't I just take the Nimbus?" Right. And in the same way, he's like, "Why can't I just get the food? Like the food is my reward for having worked as hard as I did," and skips that reverence. He skips the seeing the importance of the action as itself. The action of paying that reverence. I would just
say both Goku and Krillin.
Yeah. Well, we see Krillin literally do it, but then he does this, right? So I kind of think of them as tied to each other.
We got to look at the sequence of events, because that's what it's pretty much the basis of visual storytelling, is sequence of events.
And tying them together as a single entity.
Let me plug a film real quick called Man with the Movie Camera. It's a Russian film back before. I mean, there's no sound in it. It's like one of the first films, and it has a lot of shots that create create emotion and feeling because they have related images, and it's the first real experimentation of that. It's called Man with the Movie Camera.
Yeah, the more I get into this type of analysis and like symbolic analysis, I want to go back and watch silent films because the visual storytelling or the language of speaking through images is I appreciate it a lot more. This has definitely made me appreciate that.
So they have to go and get breakfast at a restaurant.
So yeah, Roshi says, "Let's just eat out," and they run and go get their breakfast in the city or in the town. Really, they're not really in the city, right? And as Goku's eating, he sneezes, and it's mainly comedic here. But Krillin and Roshi, upon hearing the sneeze, immediately run from the table and hide in the corner, and then they blush in shame. What do you think about the fact that now Goku sneezes when they're eating?
Oh, I think it's to show the Pavlovian nature of their relationship with Launch at this point. So
yeah, I think it's to show that it's instilled that respect towards her, right?
Yeah, that definitely. It's one of the last times she attacks them. I'm pretty sure we're coming up to that.
Yeah, the integration, right? That she's more functional within the group.
And I think this is one of the last times we see her rage in that way. And yeah, they're embarrassed because they're falling prey to their classical conditioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and humans are capable of more sophisticated thought patterns than that, let's say. So, they go get breakfast, Goku sneezes, and we see Pavlov's dogs run into the corner. And then they go back, and it's time to study.
Right, so Roshi sets up a board, and I love Goku's just sitting here with a pencil and a notebook, or a pencil and a book, and has no idea what they're good for. He's just sort of like, he holds them like a wet blanket in front of him. And of course Krillin's like, "Oh, I've got you completely beaten at this." And
It's
think
funny
that's pretty significant.
Later on, Krillin in the dub says, "How do you spell X?" Just reminded me of a great meme man, Beetlejuice. Reminded me of him.
Right. I really like this scene because this line in this scene because it highlights the relationship between Krillin and Goku. Because I was just saying that I kind of think of Goku functioning, or Krillin functioning as an extension of Goku. And there's this duality between the two of them where Goku is more unconscious and Krillin's more egoistic, right? And so it's like, yeah, obviously Krillin would be better than Goku at this just because of what he's representing in the sort of the duality between the two,
Right. And obviously it's harder for Goku, which is why I think it was the intense training, is that inner focused part. And it's not just, I wouldn't say it's simply academic study that they're undergoing here. But at any rate, they do it every day. They improve their minds. But I mean, like a great dwarf once said, a mind needs a book like a sword needs a whetstone, right?
A great self-insert for Germ.
Hamster ball.
I don't even want to talk about it. I'll just derail this whole podcast.
Yeah, and so they read literature. Why do they read literature? So are you saying that Toriyama understands the mythological significance of what he's writing?
No.
No. Why do they read literature?
They read literature because I think that there's, mythologically speaking, the reverence for what a book represents, sort of the organization of words of speech. Like a book as an extension of speech. And we
I
talked
think
we
a
talked
better
about magic
word,
words,
a
right?
better word for organization, I think, would be alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay.
But yeah, the reverence to words themselves as an extension of the fact that the turtle hermit works in magic words, right? He has magic words on his shirt. Whenever we see him for the first time, he does the Kamehameha as a magic word, and we talked about the creative nature of magic words, and so it has to be a part of an extension of himself, right?
Precisely. The divinity of the spoken word has to be addressed in the training. So let's just shortly recap what they've done so far. Let's say lessons the meta lessons they've learned from these exercises, right? And that's why it's not like, I wouldn't say it's not like other anime. I don't remember the specific word for it. Like boy anime? Shonen? Yeah, okay. So it's not like other of those like Naruto and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they train to get stronger and that's it. The first explanation of this training that we see in Dragon Ball is very focused on the meta lessons that they learn, and that would be in the first, the delivery, right? Serving the common good, finding enlightenment through traveling to the mountaintop, seeing, right, the society that they're serving, all that stuff. And then the nourishment of their actions, we've already said, upon the society nourishes their own. And now we see the reverence for the spoken word.
Right. And this tying into the nourishment of society as well, right? Because when you are reading, you are learning how to organize your own words. You're learning how to speak through reading the words of somebody else, right? So this is sort of also the lesson to teach them another way to nourish society. That if they hold others' words with reverence, then they can hold their own words with reverence.
And thereby make their spirit stronger. Or ki. Spirit. Ki. Spirit. And so then they go to eat lunch after studying.
Yeah, I just grabbed one clip from it because it's pretty funny. They just sit there and stare at lunch as she makes different noises, thinking that she's going to sneeze. They're just terrified of her.
Oh. Yes.
And we see that she's instilled that respect into them.
And so now they can kind of integrate with launch. And it's actually, I think it's no wonder that it's Goku that sneezes, because he's already integrated with her. We saw that last episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Goku sneezes, let's say, at the restaurant, to be precise in my answer to your question.
Sure. I mean, you could say that Goku is unconsciously emulating something that he is seen through launch, which is a recognition that people aren't showing enough reverence in a situation like that, right? Mm-hmm. That it's an unconscious sort of it like bubbles to the top, right? It manifests itself through Goku. The same idea that manifests
it's funny,
with her, right?
and Toriyama always does this in such a funny way. The show is so brilliant because it's expressing these ideas while being funny and continuing the story.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It's taking really complex and significant ideas that are spiritually loaded and finding a way to keep them entertaining for kids. I mean, it's just so impressive.
And after lunch, many cultures have done this, and this is exactly what Roshi instructs the boys to do, is after lunch they rest. And lunch, probably the biggest meal of the day. I don't even think they mention supper in this. We'll see.
No, I don't think that they do.
Yeah, lunch is the biggest meal of the day.
Yeah, I mean, well.
Especially since wait. Did you fast forward from, or did you not include any clips from the big rice thing?
No, that's later.
Oh, is it? Okay, never mind. Fast forward. I'm a boomer. Here we go. So this is the time when it's kind of explaining the philosophy behind the Turtle Hermit Way. He says, in the dub, I think it's more succinct. Correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but he says, work hard, study well, and eat and sleep plenty.
Yeah,
Here he
I think
says,
it's worded better that way. But I like the way it's worded here, just because eating and sleeping plenty is eating well and resting well. And so what he's trying to say is, what you do, do it well.
right. I actually do also like the word move
Mm-hmm.
instead of work hard. Move well.
Yeah, it
You're
sounds
a
really
moving
basic,
object in space, right?
but
You can choose the way you move.
Well, it's
you
saying
can't
that
stop moving.
your actions should be good, right? Whatever you do, do it well.
Yes.
That's your movement. Like whatever animates you, make sure that you're animating well or that you're interacting well, right?
Right. And I should rephrase. People are moving objects, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Everyone else too is resting at this time.
Right. So I like how structured these episodes are, because this is the end of the first half, right before we get that commercial break, and it's a reflection of the 3 modes of training that we saw earlier. That the commonality amongst all of these modes of training yourself is that they all require good rest. And so Goku, well, he's talking to Roshi here, and he says something along the lines of,
And
while we're resting, won't other people be training and becoming better?
Yes.
And then he falls asleep, and we see that it's that resting well is a commonality regardless, and that it's to say that if you need to rest, don't internalize it as a failure in and of yourself, because everybody requires rest to progress.
Point also to say that people whose routine do not allow for rest are not following the way. I think it's another commentary of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because many people are not allowed to rest in this way, to work hard and then rest in the day and continue to work and then rest after that. It's a very unique system.
Yeah, I mean, and think of the mode of being that you could be in these days, where you're up all night. You don't feel the need to rest well, right? You're not getting good rest because you're not exerting yourself in the world enough to be tired enough.
You have
to rest
move well. You have to learn well. You have to eat well. You really have to eat well. And then you'll be able to rest well. That's why it comes in that order. And man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the original is better. So after the boys wake up, they arrive at the construction site.
So we see an escalation of, I don't want to say it's a 1-to-1, but it's definitely an escalation of the idea in the last training that they did physically, which was that they had to work. They had to do hard work on an area on the land, right, to do something that nourished society. And so sort of an escalation of that is, okay, so you've prepared the ground for nourishment, right? You have put your hand to the earth to prepare it to nourish society. Now build. So build upon that, and they're literally building upon that with their character, right?
Interesting analysis. Was that preconceived?
No, I'm just
shooting off
the dome
fly.
right now.
Okay, I'm just asking. Hold on, let me. Oops. So I would say here, I'm not so, because they actually do get paid for this work. So I'm not so sure that it's just to nourish society. I think it's to say that be constructive when you're earning money. People should be constructive when they earn money instead of being, and they should also work the hardest to achieve the top of the hierarchy, and no matter what position they're put in, which we also see that. And people shouldn't rely on technology to be their virtue in those types of settings. It's a lot of things, I think, tied into one. But I'm not so sure it's about it's a building upon the idea of nourishing your actions through nourishing society. Well, I'm not sure about
it is an elevation of the same idea, because it's like, okay, here's, you could say plowing the field is a hard day's work. And then they're introduced to a more complex version of it that pays them, and it seems incidental. Roshi introduces it as an incidental aspect of it, that and you'll get paid. You're not doing it to get paid, right? And so it's like, okay, here's a hard day's work that you'll experience when you're older and you can get paid, but it's still not about the money. It's still about the hard day's work. And this is sort of making that delineation for people that, like, even if you are being paid, it's about the work you put in. And even if you have, it's like, okay, you've been trusted enough to do a hard day's work without the technology to assist you. So I'll trust you with the technology to do a hard job or to do hard work, but it's still the ethic of doing the hard work.
So if we extrapolate the idea, like this is to say not to cut, that people shouldn't cut corners as they're trying to achieve. And this first scene is actually excellent because it's the boys proving themselves. So it's not to use the technological innovations to exploit them, to place yourself at the top of the hierarchy when you don't know the basics, when people don't know the basics of the hierarchy they're in, right?
Yeah, and this is to say that your work ethic is so powerful regardless of where you're entering from. If you have the right work ethic, then you're of value.
Correct. And actually that can be personal anecdote from Brok that could be extrapolated in that. I think really anyone that works hard and tries to put themselves at the top of the hierarchy. But again, I'm not sure. I still don't see the connection between the agricultural work and the construction work in that way. I think they're two separate ideas being expressed.
I think that they're two separate ideas, but the two ideas build on each other in a sense that, like, that.
Okay, so what you're saying?
I think
okay,
of it imagistically working its way
I think
up.
I can reword and come to an agreement of what you're saying here. So what you're saying is.
So what you're saying is.
Before you can enter a workforce that you receive compensation for. Let me rephrase. Before people enter the workforce they can receive compensation for, first you have to nourish society and thereby nourish your ethic of your actions.
Yeah, it's to say that
I see what you're saying now.
That if you treat the space that you're going to work within with respect to begin with, when you enter the workforce, you will treat that space with enough respect that your work ethic will speak for itself.
What I was more thinking that you were meaning was that this is a higher level hierarchy action of nourishing your actions by nourishing society.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. But I think that the ethic that is necessary for them to have learned the lessons of the nourishment that they did in the plowing of the land for them to be of value to this workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Krillin says, do we have to do this with our hands too, right? They respect the value of doing the work themselves. And then Roshi says, okay, well then I guess I'll let you use tools this time, right? So they need to respect what they're doing. And it's like, oh, you respect the spirit of doing the work, right? Of getting the work done and doing it yourself. And so you can use something that you can use the effects of society, right? The tools that they've created and still do a good job, still have a good work ethic.
Exactly. And while they're working, Krillin has this flashback. So they're working hard. They're trying to prove their worth. This is actually significant why he has this flashback when they are positioning themselves in the hierarchy at the construction site. There were no other workers to contend with at the agricultural work, nor were there any other students at Roshi's school, nor were there any other boys delivering milk, right? But here, they are in competition for compensation against other workers. So Krillin trying to prove himself on the hierarchy, he has this flashback where he gets beat up by these bullies at Orin Temple, and he works, or this drives him to swing the pickaxe so hard he breaks it and, let's say, shocks the foreman and Roshi. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's great. I think that you can look at a dojo like a different hierarchy that Krillin didn't succeed in and ran away from, to go find the training to figure out how he could operate in a hierarchy like that to begin with. You know,
would you say the hierarchy at Orin Temple is toxic?
Not necessarily.
And what do I mean by toxic? I don't mean...
That's a loaded word for sure.
It is, but I actually mean toxic. I mean cannibalistic. self-corroding.
Yeah,
Like,
well, yeah.
that's
I mean,
what I mean
the
by
attitude
toxic.
of the older actors here, right, is
And why
toxic.
is it?
It's because it's not nourishing to the potential of those who show up to try to better themselves in the first place. It is, I would say, well, it is has no reverence toward the spirit of the desire for betterment, right? So it claims an ego from existing higher up in the hierarchy, and then is not even resentful, but dismissive of someone who would want to climb the hierarchy in the first place. You could say it's someone who doesn't respect where they came from.
This
And
is what happens when the big rat doesn't let the small rat win. Ever.
Right. It doesn't play.
It refuses and it leaves. Exactly. And
Mhm.
it's important that it comes here because this is what drove Krillin to seek a new path.
Right, but that path is the same path for him, right? And you can see that it's a motivating factor for him that he's been given another chance to try to operate within a hierarchy of competence above his own, and this time he's not going to stay at the bottom. And I wouldn't say resentment even, but the past failing as respecting where he came from is what elevates him here. Whereas, like I was saying, these other monks don't respect where they came from because they didn't start out as masters. They didn't start out. Everyone started out as small as Krillin at some point, right?
I just want to point out, though, the difference in attitude now of Krillin.
Mm-hmm.
After he's used this as his motivating factor, I don't think he doesn't really complain anymore. He may make a statement here and there, but I don't think he complains like he was before.
Yeah,
he's
this is mainly
progressing
a lesson for Krillin.
And I think too it has to be the construction work, right?
Yeah, it's like the ethic of being constructive. That if you can respect that,
Here's
then you
a
can be
constructive hierarchy.
too.
Here's a destructive hierarchy. Use the destructive hierarchy as motivation
To be constructive.
for people to further their goals. That's the path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll astound people how efficient you can become when that is the path that you're on. And that's what happens here.
Right, and we see with the last shot
And it's a
there
little
that-
glimmer of Krillin's divinity that's unique from Goku's, let's say.
What do you mean?
I mean, Krillin's ability to achieve a particular path that Goku couldn't be on because he hasn't had this experience, let's say.
Yeah, well, there's a motivation for Krillin that Goku doesn't have here, right? Goku doesn't have he has not experienced that toxic hierarchy that would hold him down, that would be dismissive or resentful towards him for even wanting betterment, right?
Right. And yeah, I think toxic hierarchy is a good word for it. And Goku is then the next one to complain. That's right. Goku complains that he's not teaching him martial arts, and Roshi is saying, well, F that.
Roshi's like, it's such to spit, right? Is this act of, how would you describe spit? Like, spitting is basically like, I'm rejecting.
It's meant a lot, actually. It's meant a lot over the years, but sure.
But it is such a harsh rejection of what Goku says, because it's like that idea that you're saying there, that like, never mind this kind of stuff. It's like, I spit on that.
Yeah, and he goes on to say, like, how dare you, as young as you are, say that, right? How dare you not see the value in these very mythological lessons that we're explaining, but obviously they're not particularly verbalized for the boys. The spirit of it is what they have to adopt, and a lot of people see the accepting of that spirit because it's not self-evident as faithful, let's say. The boys have to be faithful to Roshi's teaching in order to proceed, and they don't know the outcome of the training even further past what we're going to get to today.
Yeah, I mean, think in in the last episode, Goku was motivated by the fact that his father figure, right, had walked the path that he was walking. And so Roshi's like, have you forgotten the face of your father already?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's, so what, I mean, this is a surprising and very unique instance for Goku to show this, this lack of reverence.
Well, it also comes right after Roshi tells him they're going to be swimming in the lake. That kind of adds an analysis of that. Like a disgust. Yeah, exactly. Definitely, it's disgust.
Disgust. Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking of.
Yes. And so in the lake, right, that's a place of reflection.
It's the water representing mythologically unconscious, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so Goku taking time to do that reflection is not something that appeals to him. He wants to take the shortcut. Right, and it's not so much that he wants to take the shortcut, but Goku is an efficient creature.
Goku is he's empty-headed in the way that monks would say is a good way to be, but we see that here because, let's say that Goku's empty of mind in the way that you need to be integrated with yourself. It's almost like he's saying, I'm not going to gain anything from this, right? I'm already integrated. I'm already like, what's there within me to meditate on? And Roshi's like, it's the act itself.
Yes, the act itself is holy. We'll get into more about why they're going swimming in a second because we have another slide here. But right, Roshi is disgusted. He's outraged because it's not showing proper reverence to the spirit of the training, which is the important part. And so Roshi then says, once you move this, your physical strength training will be complete, pointing to a seemingly impossible obstacle, right? And it's explained later, but the purpose of it is to have the boys shoot for something they can't attain.
Yeah, it's like Roshi saying, your physical training in the world is not.
That's what we mean. Do this data.
Wow, 13 work text messages.
What could be happening? Open widget.
Speed test. See what our up is.
Trying to find out.
Oh no, the internet might be down.
Is it? My internet says.
Nope. I'm getting it now. You might just have to take the stream down and go back up.
Let's try an adapter.
We might be good. Let's look. I'm not getting anything on mine. Let me refresh the stream.
Let's try this. Let's try that.
Look at this. Look at that.
It looks like we are back. It's continuing.
Can I hear me?
It looks like I'm good. Let's see if this will go away. Well, sorry about that, everyone.
Oh, we're good. We're live.
Hey,
again.
turn me off. You're gonna make a bunch of echo.
Oh, I can turn you off.
All right, what the hell? Where are we? What were we saying?
So we were just talking about the rock. So we were saying that, he interpreted it as something that was unobtainable for them, and that's why he framed it that way.
It's a rock, yes.
But yeah, I like that. No matter what Roshi does, he can't seem to frame anything in a way that they're not capable of doing, right? And he's doing that to try to avoid escalating their training to physical combat because he's like, okay, as long as you can see this goal for yourself that is not that's not fighting as an action, you will keep on trying to better yourself, right?
Also,
and the problem is that his ideas are manifesting through them, and they are able to become things he doesn't even think that they can become, just by their adherence to it.
Also, he later on he says that he should have pointed at a mountain, but I think that would be too much. I think this is the right goal to aim at, something that's beyond your abilities at the moment, but not out of your grasp completely. And the
Right.
boys can both conceptualize moving it, obviously, or else they wouldn't be able to.
Well, it's still identifiable as a rock and not a mountain, right?
Yes, it's a boulder.
But I think it's pointing towards that idea of moving mountains.
Mm-hmm. And so then the boys get into the reflective part of the training, which actually I like that he does the strength check, right before the reflection, because that's when you really focus on it. And they say it feels rather good to reflect. However, within your own spirit, there are sharks. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that part of the motivating ethic that you have, and this is kind of tied into that Jiminy Cricket conscience type thing, is that you have the motivating judgmental father within you that's going to keep pushing you forward, right? So when you go into your self-reflection, you find the thing within your unconscious that is chasing you.
Well, I think it's also a physical manifestation of people's weakness. What if you stopped swimming? If you stopped moving forward, what would happen? You'd be consumed by your weakness, and that's why it's a shark. It has to be something that consumes you. And it's a funny joke.
Yeah, it's not.
Here's a shark in a lake. They're not supposed to be there, but guess what?
Well, I could tie it
It's
back into like a more Peter
important.
Pan sort of frame too. You think of the alligator crocodile in the water.
Right, when you reflect,
right?
when you're self-conscious, right? Your mortality, you're more aware of your mortality, your weakness, like I was saying. That's driving you.
Yeah, that's true. I do like the idea that it's like, Goku's like, I'm strong enough. Roshi says, okay, you're not as strong as you think you are because you're not strong enough to do this. Go into the self-reflection. Okay, he goes into the self-reflection, and the concept of his not being good enough, right? His weakness, not necessarily just in strength, but the possibility of his weakness in character still persists there, right? So that Goku's saying, I'm good enough, right? I'm a good enough person because I can ride the Kinto Un in the same way. And Roshi's saying, you think you're good enough? There's still sharks in the water.
Exactly.
There's still that thing that can consume you. And whenever you're there thinking about it, you still need to keep moving forward. You still need to keep on the path. You can't rest, so to speak.
And
can't be caught slipping.
Krillin and Goku look at each other here like Jesus. And it's true. The training is quite intense. It's tackling aspects of personal strife one step at a time and fixing them one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they swim away from their weaknesses. And actually, Krillin starts swimming back to shore at first. Right? He's saying he would rather not reflect.
Right, and Master Roshi says, what are you doing? You're not done with the training. Do the training.
Right, and if, let's say, Krillin got out of the water, I think that he would then go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a speculation.
Well, this is tying together the three elements that you want to talk about in self-betterment, which is the body, mind, and spirit, right? We've seen how they've tried to better their body and how that improves their ethic. We've seen how bettering their mind improves their ethic. And then also here, this is symbolic of bettering your spirit, right? Your spirit being your self-reflection and the wisdom of where you exist as within yourself, right?
Right, and so they swim 10 laps or
10 laps through the shark-infested pool.
10 laps of reflection. And then we get to this part of the training where Roshi ties the boys up and has them dodge hornets. Do you have an analysis here?
Well, I did mention Jiminy Cricket.
You did.
So I did bring up the insect.
Yes.
And it might be a little bit more relevant to what's happening here, where they are tied to a piece of nature and assaulted by insects, and that they know that it's part of their lesson that they need to be able to dodge. I think my analysis would be that you need to be able to stay tethered to your nature while also not being hindered by that conscience that calls you out on your insufficiencies.
Okay, let me I think that my analysis is just one or two steps further because I think you're on the right track.
Okay.
Did you have an analysis before? Okay.
No.
So, trees, let's say in mythology, you have Yggdrasil, right? When
Right.
you think of that,
The
tying
world
to,
tree.
yes,
Tree
tying
as
to the
such.
world tree, right? You're tied to society.
Okay.
The hornets are the criticisms of society. This is something, like you said, to strengthen your spirit. It's and literally it thickens their skin.
I like that there's two levels to this, right?
Yeah,
Because your
yes,
conscious
exactly.
is baked into the criticisms that society will give you. Like society exists as an extension of the criticisms that you need to be able to internalize.
And they also come from above. Don't
Mhm.
forget, it's coming from the society judging you,
Yeah.
right? And so
And them being insects, tying that into the
And-
conscience and
it's not lethal to be stung. And so being stung multiple times, it thickens your skin to those
like that, yeah.
criticisms. So like I said, just one or two steps further. But
yeah,
you were on the right track.
Well,
for
it's an
sure.
extension of that idea
Yeah.
up to a higher tier in the pyramid, you could say, right?
Right. And so this is the last one. It's an important step. And for anyone that complains about the criticism or comments that they get online, this is a lesson to take into account. Eventually, if you practice this,
You'll be able to dodge them.
You'll be able to dodge them, yes.
But we also see that not even Roshi is necessarily immune.
You may never, and then that's the thing. Even the best creators, like they're like, it's not fun, but I deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Roshi's exhibiting here.
Yeah, and I think also on the conscience level, it's like Roshi's not pure, right? He's not just the perfect wise master, and so he is also vulnerable to the lessons that he wants to teach.
But he is able to conceal his flaw.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first day of training ends, Brok.
This is a day of training under the turtle hermit. Do you think it means anything that the shark and Jaws music doesn't start until after Roshi warns them about it?
I think the only thing there is to... Ooh, my mouse was on there. I don't know about the Jaws theme specifically. Obviously an homage, but more of addressing the first part of the question.
Well, I like that as an observation that it is a nice swim until Roshi tells them that it's a shark-infested water, right? It's almost like, let's say this is an analog to meditation, and the students can be like, oh, this is rest. It's like, oh, this is great. Like, this is not as hard as the physical work. And then Roshi says, look deeper within yourself and see what's really there. And then the challenge of the meditation
Or perhaps
arises.
it's the notion that it's instilling the notion of, and like we said, it was weakness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's Roshi making them aware of their weaknesses in the reflective moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what causes the sharks to come. But yeah, I think it is Roshi. It's a nudge by Roshi, I would say, in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a manifestation of it being a piece of the training, and so Roshi speaks it to them.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And so yeah, we get to the end of the first day of training. Brok, you got any final thoughts on the training? Well, I guess we have one more bit, and that's them wearing the turtle shells.
Right. You now need to adorn yourself with what the turtle shell is.
Which is? Man, if I could do... Where's the Goku emote when I need it?
Yeah. I'm trying to logically work my way up to saying what I think that it is. That... What it's functioning as is something that they wear on them just for the sake of making the challenge that they're facing harder, just for the sake of betterment. But it's the understanding, at least the fact that it's heavy, right? My analysis of that part of it is that it's similar to the skipping and the weaving through the trees and doing things in a meaningful way rather than the expedient way. And the idea, the ethos of the turtle, right? You think of the tortoise and the hare, which is that the tortoise does things in a meaningful way, whereas the rabbit does things in an expedient way, right? And so I think part of that has to do with that idea, but I know that it's even more. But that's my surface level analysis.
So right, and let's take Kame House for example, right? Kame turtle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see the symbol of turtle reoccur in the show. Now, what is that? We said earlier, Kame House is the house as such, right? The spirit of home, right? It's an embodiment of that, a physical manifestation of the spirit of home. Now, why is it a turtle, right? We've talked about this before.
Well, I guess this is Goku perpetually carrying the turtle on his back now, right? Because we've seen him carry turtle on his back to the sea before, and that's how he got to Roshi in the first place.
Not only is it that walking with God, but it is because it's part of them now, right? It's not just walking with God, right? It's assuming those.
It's trying to embody
qualities. Now, also, I wanted to touch on what I was saying is Kame House, right? It's the spirit of the house, the spirit of the home. And the reason it's Kame is because it's that which preserves spirits. That is what turtles are symbolic of. Preservation, right? Defense. That which preserves spirits is the path you will take while you're undergoing all of these spiritual, mindful, and physical trainings.
And the spirit of that is doing it in the meaningful way, kind of what I was saying, right?
Yeah, a combination of those. But right, it's that spirit that preserves, Kame House, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to see, too, how that spirit carries on symbolically through the series. Yes, again, Adam is walking with God, and so is...
So is Krillin?
So is Cain.
Yeah, I mean, in the hostile brothers, right, which aren't always hostile, but the duality of man.
Well, he's gone through. He's gone through that now. His spirit is no longer tainted.
You know, you could think of like, you know, the duality of man as shown in the development of what Goku and Krillin is. It's trying to reconcile that Cain and Abel problem, right? Saying, okay, like, learn the, like, you know, we've compared this to the biblical stories a lot, so we could kind of say here that the way that Dragon Ball is treating these biblical stories is that it's trying to resolve some of the things talked about early in like Genesis and Exodus and stuff like that, and integrate it and then build on it, right? And this is, you know, I like that you mentioned Cain, because there's this, like, okay, well, what if he could integrate the lesson and then move beyond that hierarchy of the duality of man, right? And then take it up a notch towards society, towards the hierarchy as a concept and all of that.
And that's what they're shooting for, is achieving a suitable position in the hierarchy of hierarchies, and that's the tournament. So I think that's pretty much it for this episode, but it's very important, the Turtle Hermit Way. Just to recap real quick, so in the beginning, they delivered milk, serving society, right? And then they worked on the farm, nourishing their actions, nourishing their ethic. Then they studied, right? Nourishing their minds. And then they worked in construction. And we talked about, how in order to do the constructive work and be compensated for it, you first have to strengthen the ethic of your actions. The ethic of your actions has to be pure in order for you to achieve the top of the hierarchy in a productive work setting. Then they go on to reflect. They have a strength challenge. And I assume the boys do that every day. Just my headcanon. The boys try to push the rocks every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's shown in the next episode, too, that part of their routine is they run around the rock. So, yeah, it's a part of their routine.
It's part of the routine to test themselves and then do the reflection of their weaknesses.
And then upon reflection, they need to toughen up.
Yes.
And develop a thicker skin, and they need to solidify their sense of self so that they can repeat repeat the whole process again.
Right.
For betterment.
And that is the Turtle Hermit Way. In the next episode, we will talk about the Tenkaichi tournament, because it is going to begin. They're going to start wrapping up the training and going into the actual hierarchy of hierarchies, pitting spirits against one another.
Pitting modes of being against each other to find what is the best mode of being.
And which is it? We'll see. Any final words, Brok?
No, I think that this episode was even more significant, on reflection than I thought it was, and all of the different images and the ideas become more and more resonant the more you talk about them. Like, you talk about Cain not respecting the sacrifice, right? And the wearing of the shell is an ultimate respect of the sacrifice, right? The proper type of sacrifice that needs to be made for the sake of betterment and for the sake of receiving the thing from above, receiving what you want from life, what you want from the unknown.
Right. I think that's pretty much a good place to end. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, give us a like, give us a comment if you disagree with anything. I don't think we made any mistakes, but I do want to mention we did make one mistake. I think last Myth and Meaning, I put an edit on it. I think we mentioned something that happens later. So if that's something that's got your jimmies in a rustle, just look at the comments, please. I think that's pretty much it for us. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And this was Get the Mic, episode 18, The Turtle Hermit Way.